Hello, this is Kevin Jones. Welcome to Reformation and Revival Now. We are in part 5 of our spiritual life series, and we are going to continue right off of Hebrews 6, which we looked at last video, because it laid the foundations of the basic doctrines of Christ, which are to be experienced, not just taught, but experienced. Always keep that in mind when you're doing any Bible study. If you can't live it out, it's really not worth it. But we know that living and doing the word is worth it. So since we're talking about exercising our spirit man, then we need to know the functions of the spirit. So let's start off with the first and primary function, which every other function is built upon. And that is the ability to worship. To be able to worship is why we were born again. Ezekiel 36 says, "A new heart I will give you and a new spirit." It's from the new spirit and the new heart that you actually can worship. Jesus said in the 4th chapter with the woman of the well, he said, "Those that worship me must worship me in spirit and in truth. God is a spirit, and those that worship me must worship me in spirit and in truth." So that's obvious that that first function is to worship. Now, the woman at the well, as well as Jesus, understood ceremonial worship. It was a part of their upbringing. The woman in the well might not have been doing it right, but she still understood ceremonial worship. But spiritual worship is having that living relationship with Jesus where you are born again of the Spirit. So you are able to contact God spirit to spirit. So the primary function is worship above anything else. Now the second function or sense of the Spirit is revelation, very much related to worship. And I just want to say as a note, just as your 5 physical sense gates are related, I mean your smelling and your tasting and your eyes are all related to each other. You know, sometimes I can smell something and see something. See that relation there? Well, your spirit is the same way. Because you have revelation, it's very related to the fact that you are a worshiper. God has brought you into himself, and out of that you have revelation. So it's the same thing. So revelation is that ability to receive knowledge that doesn't come through the 5 physical sense gates. It comes through the Spirit. By the Spirit of God to your spirit, you can know or do things that you did not learn in your own strength or in the power of the flesh or of the soul, of the mind. All right, now a third function of the Spirit, there we go, they are very close, but yet a little different, is the function of discernment. Now, I'm not talking about the discernment of Spirit's gift. I'm not referring to that. I'm referring to the general discernment of spirits that are in your spirit because you're born again. And it works like this. Because you've entered in to worship into God through the Spirit, and you have experienced God by the Spirit, then when someone else comes in another spirit, you know something isn't right. And that's the general discernment. It's kind of like the people who work on counterfeit projects. They don't know all the counterfeit that's out there. They just know the real so well that when a fake comes along, they can see it from a mile away. This is the same foundation for the discernment of spirits in your spirit. The ability to have that discernment comes from knowing the living God in truth, in spirit and in truth. And somebody comes in another spirit, they have another motive, they have another attitude, then you recognize that they are not of God, no matter how good their confession of faith is, no matter how good their creed is or whatever you know them by the Spirit. You know that they got another angle. It may be religious, but it's not the love and the Spirit of Jesus love like you used to. All right, now I'm gonna go ahead and take a break because these things kind of spill over to each other. So let's take a break and we'll get back and we'll do the other senses. Welcome back. We've been talking about the senses, and I'm going to go over two more. And like I said in the first half, they are all related. The next one, very similar to discernment, very discernment to revelation, and of course they're all related to worship, is what watchmen need called intuition. This is the ability to make decisions without necessarily all the faculties of the flesh. In other words, let's say you're an employer and you're going to hire some people, and you got two people you're looking at. Their credentials are identical. But when you get into the interview, though both of them are great, they got great personalities and everything, but you just have this sense that this particular guy, though his credentials are not any better, was a better fit for this particular job. But it's not really on paper. It's an intuition. It's something that you just know. This is the one I really like. You're driving down the road, and all of a sudden, you just feel, I need to get into the left lane. And so you move into the left lane, and all of a sudden, just a few seconds later, there's an accident that you would have been in the midst of, but just all of a sudden, you just knew to move into the left lane. This is intuition in its most classic form. And I just want to say to you, get used to exercising your spirit, because you believe it or not, some of these things you already have experienced, but you never put a name on it. Really, a Bible teacher's job is not to give you knowledge. If you're born again, you have it. A teacher's job in Christendom is to help the believer or fellow believer identify what he already has in God, because you've received an anointing that you've received from God, the Holy One, and you know everything you need to know. So really, what I'm doing is putting a word on it. I'm putting a phrase on it, but some of you have experienced these things. But let's go on to the next one. Now, the next one is the highest of all of them. Yes, even higher than worship. Not higher than worship, but deeper. The next one is the word that we get intercourse from, and that is the word communion. This is the total surrender and total intimacy of your spirit communing oneness, intercourse with the Spirit, where you're one with God. This is where a lot of times you will get the deeper revelations, the deeper discernments, the deeper intimacy. A lot of times you will receive your call from this particular place. It's a place where God reveals himself to you in such a personal way. And just like you remember the Lord's Supper, particularly in John's Gospel, the intimacy of that chapter 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. This is a deep intimacy where God is revealing himself to you and laying it all out there to you, you as his child, he as your father, you as the prospective bride, he as the bridegroom, and you're coming into that. These are all functions of your spirit. So after this particular video, from this moment on, we're going to begin to show you how these things really do work in life, and how they really apply in your everyday life. Some of them you will recognize instantly, some you won't. Some people excel in certain things in the spirit, and some people excel in other areas. Like, let me give you an example. My wife really excels in the area of intuition and discernment. Okay. She functions better than I do in those areas. But I function better in the area of revelation. And I function better in the area of worship. Okay. So, but we both function in all of them. But I tend to dwell more in worship and in revelation. My wife tends to do more with visions, dreams, discernment, intuition, because this is the way God made her. But we're going to be getting into this, so I want you to please stay tuned with us. I promise that I'm going to keep this practical. I'm not going to get deep. I'm going to keep it nuts and bolts. All right, God bless you. We'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.